He gave her divorce papers in a big glass-walled penthouse. His words were cold, just like his sister had told him to say, "You don't belong in our family." Caspian didn't know that the small shake in Alara's hands wasn't because she was scared. It was because she was holding life inside her. Two quiet heartbeats were learning how to survive together. Alara Vesper walked out without arguing. She carried a secret that Caspian didn't deserve to know. Years later, the internet would show her smiling with another billionaire, and Caspian would feel regret for the first time. But on the night pride broke his vows, Alara learned something important. Love can leave, but dignity stays. Destiny never forgets. He would chase ghosts while she built a home. Before we start today's story, comment below where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you haven't already. You won't want to miss what's next. Alara Vesper married Caspian Thorne after a whirlwind year filled with rooftop dinners and whispered promises high above New York City. She thought love was strong, steady, and patient, like the sun rising or the rain falling. Their penthouse had big glass windows that reflected two people dreaming of forever. Caspian was smart, busy, and good at making deals. Alara convinced him with her warmth and kind heart. They planned a nursery in secret, sharing baby names quietly. They saved ultrasound dates on the calendar. Outside, the city ticked time by, but inside, their love felt certain and beautiful. Then came Octavia Thorne, Caspian's older sister. She cared a lot about how things looked. She smiled at Alara in front of others, but secretly questioned her background, friends, and quiet Southern manners. "Tradition needs rules," she said. "Our family name needs protection." She turned little worries into big problems. Caspian, wanting to respect his family, started measuring love by appearances. Slowly, things changed. Breakfasts got cold. Invitations came, but Alara's name was missing. Octavia's whispers moved like invisible elevator cables, lifting Caspian's attention away from Alara. It began with a photo taken out of context, Alara at a work dinner. Then a fake email chain suggested she was hiding ambitions. Octavia sent these warnings, like neighbors bringing casseroles after a storm. Caspian started doubting Alara. The man who once drew constellations on her wrist now read memos with suspicion. Love became measured, scheduled, and questioned. Alara noticed the little changes, doors that paused, eyes that no longer smiled. Love felt like it needed approval. When Alara found out she was pregnant, she held the tiny life close and cried quietly into a towel. Two heartbeats were growing in her, synchronized like iris. She imagined Caspian laughing, building a crib, and calling his mother with the news. She marked the first ultrasound on the kitchen chalkboard, a small comfort in chalk dust. That night, Caspian came home late. He kissed her forehead but reached for his phone instead of her hand. Distance arrived, dressed in perfect clothes. Love became like a meeting, planned, confirmed, but cold. He didn't notice the nursery catalog open on the counter. Octavia called often, disguised as care, speaking about family traditions and rules. Alara offered dinner. He offered numbers. She told a joke. He gave silence. The city sparkled outside, but inside their apartment, love dimmed. Then, before dessert one evening, the papers came. Neat, folded, notarized. Caspian's voice was careful, almost kind, but still cutting. Alara didn't fit. The family needed order. The brand needed discipline. He said he was tired. His words hit like glass, shattering their rooftop vows. Alara asked when they stopped being a team. Caspian answered with a pen, signing away promises he once defended. Alara took a deep breath, put her dignity on, and left the penthouse without saying a word about the lives growing inside her. In the taxi, she pressed her hands over her belly, making a promise to stay silent, not to punish, but to protect. She would not let gossip touch her babies. She bought a one-way ticket to Atlanta, a city where she could start small and kind. She worked part-time at a design office and learned new streets, prices, bus routes, and prayers. She told no one about the penthouse view. She traded it for quiet sunrises through window blinds. Back in New York, Caspian tried to explain her absence. He filled his apartment with meetings and flights, thinking he was protecting her from a world she didn't understand. Octavia sent him articles about discipline and clean cuts. He convinced himself Elara would thank him someday. But at 3 a.m., scrolling through his phone, he didn't notice the nursery catalog gone or the strange silence that had entered his apartment. In Atlanta, Elara wrote letters to the twins on leftover stationery from her old life. "Dear little wonder," she began, "today you taught me courage just by existing." She described bus drivers who waited, neighbors watering plants, strangers giving up seats. She taped the letters inside a shoebox under crib parts she hadn't yet assembled. When fear came, she answered with vitamins, stretches, gratitude lists, and soft whispers. She believed names could bless places. She believed love, quietly practiced, could last longer than any penthouse view. One rainy Thursday, the office lights went out early. Elara ducked into a small cafe to wait. She ordered ginger tea and texted her friend Jude that the twins were kicking in rhythm with the storm. She sat by a window and watched rain, umbrellas, and steam against the glass. Then she saw a man fall at the counter, swaying. Elara ran to him, pressing her fingers to his neck. "Call an ambulance," she shouted. Rain poured, but she stayed calm. A barista brought a defibrillator. Elara followed the instructions, tears mixing with rain on her face. When his chest rose again, she breathed a shaky prayer. She stayed until medics promised he was okay. They asked her name. She whispered, "Elara Vesper." Someone said, "You saved him." She shook her head. "I just did what anyone should do." The ambulance lights painted her face in red. She collected her purse and walked home quietly, drenched but calm, unaware that destiny had just changed its course. 2 days later, Elara returned to work. No one knew what had happened. She finished sketches, answered calls, and smiled through morning sickness. The cafe scene replayed in her mind. She hoped he survived, but didn't expect to see him again. That evening, the receptionist gave her an envelope. A note inside read, "You saved my life. I'd like to thank you personally. Sullivan Croft." Elara reread it twice. The name sounded familiar. Sullivan Croft, a real estate billionaire she had seen before. She tucked the note in her purse. The next morning, roses arrived with another card. "Please allow me to thank you in person. Cafe on Peachtree, noon." Elara told Jude, who laughed. "Girl, if a billionaire wants coffee, at least hear him out." Elara smiled but promised nothing. The next day, she dressed carefully and went to the cafe. Sullivan was there, standing when she entered. He smiled warmly. "You shouldn't have gone through that alone." She smiled. "You shouldn't have scared everyone like that." They laughed. Silence followed, comfortable and calm. He thanked her again, sincerely, without ego. "You owe me nothing," she said. "We were just in the right place at the right time." Sullivan noticed her calm, her strength after storms. He said, "People don't just happen where they are needed." His gaze fell on her belly. "You're expecting?" Elara nodded. "Twins," she said softly. He smiled warmly. They talked about life, work, and the cafe that changed their paths. He asked about her design work and her plans. Elara felt seen, not as an ex-wife or survivor, but as herself. When they left, he gave her his card. "If you need anything, help, advice, support, call me." She thanked him and put it away. Weeks passed. Their paths crossed often. Sullivan stopped by her boutique, pretending to need signs for his projects. Elara knew, but let him stay. They shared short talks that felt deeper than small talk. He admired her humor, discipline, and resilience. She admired his humility and quiet strength. One Friday, he brought lunch for her staff. "You shouldn't do life alone," he said. Elara smiled, cautious. Her heart remembered broken promises. At her next doctor's appointment, Sullivan drove her. "Just making sure you're safe," he said, laughing at her eye roll. The twins' heartbeats echoed in the ultrasound room. Elara teared up. Sullivan gently held her hand. "They sound strong," he whispered. "They are," she said, squeezing his hand. He dropped her home but stayed by the car. "You're remarkable. You make kindness look easy." Alara smiled and said softly, kindness isn't easy, it's a choice. 9 months later, the twins were born. The hospital smelled like cleaning soap and rain. Thunder rumbled far away as Alara held tightly onto the sides of the bed. Sweat and tears mixed on her face under the bright, harsh lights. Nurses moved around her quickly but calmly. Almost there, Miss Vesper. One more push, they said. Sullivan stood beside her, holding her hand tightly. You're doing great, he whispered softly. His voice made her feel safe in the pain. Then, like the sun breaking through clouds, the first baby cried. Seconds later, another baby cried too. Alara sobbed as the nurses lifted the tiny babies into her arms. One boy, one girl. Kaylin and Saren, my little miracles. Welcome home, she whispered, kissing each baby on the forehead. Her voice shook with tiredness and happiness. Sullivan stood next to her, tears in his eyes. Seeing her hold the twins made him feel something he couldn't explain. You're amazing, he said. They're perfect, she smiled weakly. They're loud, she teased. That's a good sign, he replied with a small laugh. Something special started between them that day. Something unspoken, but certain. After the babies were born, Sullivan visited every day. He brought food, baby formula, and laughter that filled Alara's small apartment. He changed diapers awkwardly but tried his best, making Alara smile each time. At night, they would sit by the crib, whispering stories about school, birthdays, and all the fun things the future could bring. Alara watched him hold Kaylin like he had been doing it all his life. Sometimes she stared too long, amazed at how a stranger could feel like home. She never said it out loud, just thanked him quietly, knowing that gratitude sometimes grows into love without warning. Months went by and their life found a rhythm. Sullivan returned to his work, but he always made time for Alara and the twins. His assistant joked that his calendar now ran on baby schedules. When Alara's rent went up, Sullivan surprised her with a small house outside Atlanta. You've earned this little home, he said kindly. Alara hesitated, proud and shy. You've already done too much, she said. Sullivan smiled. Let me do this one more thing, he said. She finally agreed, learning that sometimes kindness doesn't need to be paid back. It just needs to be accepted. In their quiet new home, life was full of small joys. Morning sunlight filled the kitchen as the twins learned their first words. Mama! Cookie! Light! They shouted happily. Sullivan visited often, always greeted by little arms reaching for him. Neighbors thought he was her husband. Neither of them corrected anyone. He fixed doors, read bedtime stories, and built furniture while the twins watched in wonder. At night, when Sullivan left, the house felt empty. Alara stood by the window, watching his car lights disappear. She didn't know if the ache she felt was loneliness leaving or love quietly arriving without asking. One summer evening, Sullivan came over unexpectedly, carrying groceries. Long day? Alara asked. Long year, he admitted, falling onto her couch. Saren toddled over, offering him a cookie, crumbs sticking to her hand. He laughed. Best gift ever, he said. Alara watched him with the twins, her heart full of warmth. Later, after the twins slept, Alara brought him tea. You don't have to keep coming, she whispered. I know, he said softly, but I want to. Her heart answered before her mouth could. Meanwhile, Caspian, Alara's ex-husband, lived in New York in glass buildings. He had money and fame, but his nights were quiet and lonely. He sometimes looked at old photos of Alara and remembered the woman he had loved and left. He wondered if regret ever went away. His new girlfriend Octavia thought he was just tired from work. You did the right thing, she said. Caspian nodded, but inside he didn't feel it. He had built a huge empire, but it felt empty. He didn't know that far away, Alara had built a happy life. Sullivan sometimes thought about Alara while signing contracts or at meetings. Her laughter, kindness, and strength made him feel happy in ways money never could. One afternoon, he stopped by without telling anyone and saw her asleep on the couch with the twins sleeping beside her. His heart froze. Seeing her like that made him understand why people risk everything for love. He sat quietly, watching them breathe, feeling peace he had never known. The twins' third birthday arrived with balloons, laughter, and sunshine. Sullivan grilled burgers while Alara handled frosting disasters. Kaylin and Saren squealed with joy as confetti fell. Neighbors cheered when the children blew out their candles together. Later, when the house grew quiet, Alara found Sullivan on the porch. "They adore you," she whispered. "I adore them," he said softly. They sat in warm silence. Then Sullivan said gently, "I want to be here for them, for you." Alara smiled, saying everything words couldn't. Wait a second. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe and share your favorite part in the comments below. And don't forget to drop a heart to show your support. Autumn came with cool winds and golden leaves. Alara's home was full of happiness now. Photos on the walls replaced old sadness. Sullivan had become part of their lives, always kind and loving without crossing any line. When the twins started preschool, he walked them to their classroom, carrying Saren's backpack and promising to return before lunch. Alara watched, her heart full of love. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Maybe not needed," he said, smiling, "but I can't imagine being anywhere else." For the first time, love felt safe. Years later, the twins were full of energy and imagination. Kaylin ran around wearing a superhero cape, and Saren twirled in a pink tutu, calling herself the Queen of Snacks. Alara laughed with her coffee, soaking in the joy she once thought impossible. Sullivan came in, pretending to stumble, making the twins laugh. Their laughter filled the house like sunlight. Life had grown gentle and happy. What started in heartbreak had grown into a calm, patient love. One evening, Sullivan invited Alara to a charity gala. "You should come," he said, adjusting his jacket. "It's your world, not mine," she teased. "You belong there too," he said softly. She hesitated but agreed. A week later, she stood beside him under glittering lights, looking radiant in her black gown. Photographers took pictures. One photo changed everything. The next morning, the photo of Sullivan and Alara appeared online. People asked, "Who is the mysterious woman with Sullivan Croft?" Alara's friend Jude texted her, "Girl, you're trending!" She laughed nervously. Sullivan called, "I'm sorry, I should have told you." "It's fine. Truth always comes out," Alara said calmly. In New York, Caspian saw the photo on his phone. He froze. Alara, smiling next to Sullivan, looked even more beautiful than he remembered. His breath caught. Photos in magazines showed her with the twins. Kaylin's eyes, Saren's smile, they were unmistakable. "My children," he whispered. Memories of their divorce and past mistakes rushed back. He slammed his fist on the desk. "She hid them from me," he shouted. Octavia stood quietly. She realized that all the lies she had built were now falling apart. That night, she tried to calm Caspian. "It's been many years," she said. "You have moved on." Caspian glared at her. "They are mine, Octavia," he said. "She took my children and raised them with another man." Octavia shifted nervously. "You told her to leave, remember?" he said, ignoring her. He looked at the photos of the children again. "I want them back," he said firmly, "and her too. She was never meant to belong to anyone else." His voice scared Octavia. It was not full of pride this time. It was full of desperation. For the first time in years, she saw her brother without his mask. He wasn't strong or in control. He looked haunted. She wondered if karma had finally found him. A few days later, Alara heard the doorbell ring. She thought it was a delivery, not Caspian. He stood there, cold and serious, yet strangely familiar. Her heart skipped a beat. "Caspian," she whispered. The twins peeked from the hallway, their eyes full of curiosity. "They are mine," Caspian said, his voice shaking but firm. Sullivan stepped forward from the kitchen. "You need to leave," he said, calm but strong. Caspian looked between the children and Alara. "You kept them from me," he growled. "You gave up your right to be their father." Alara replied softly, "You lost that the day you believed my sister's lies over your family." Caspian's face turned hard. "We'll see what the court thinks about that." He spat and stormed out. Alara sank onto the couch, trembling but holding herself together. Sullivan knelt beside her and held her hand. "He can't take them," she said through tears. "Not after everything." Sullivan looked into her eyes. "He won't," he said firmly. "Truth always wins in the end." Outside, Caspian's car sped away. The taillights disappeared into the night like a shadow running away. Inside, the house was quiet, except for the small voices of the twins calling, "Mommy!" Alara gathered them into her arms and whispered promises filled with love and strength. That week, a legal notice arrived. Caspian had filed a formal custody petition. "Sullivan's lawyer, Corbin Hayes, will handle this," Sullivan said. "We will fight it. You have truth, stability, and proof." Alara nodded. She felt fear, but Sullivan stayed calm beside her. "You are not alone," he said. She smiled weakly, remembering the first night she met him, how his life had been broken and how she had helped him. "Maybe," she whispered, "it's my turn to be rescued." Sullivan squeezed her hand gently. "No," he said. "You already saved us all." The courtroom was quiet and tense. Alara sat next to Sullivan, holding her hands tightly. Across the room, Caspian paced, angry and restless, while his lawyer whispered strategies. Outside, the twins sat with Jude, unaware of the courtroom battle. Cameras waited outside to capture everything. Caspian spoke first. "She hid my children," he said coldly. Alara's lawyer stood calmly. "She protected them," he said. The judge, tired but firm, adjusted her glasses. "We will hear the truth," she said. Justice felt close enough to breathe. Octavia went to the stand first. She looked perfect, but her eyes shook. Caspian's lawyer asked about the emails that were supposed to prove Alara's lies. Octavia hesitated. "Answer the question, Miss Thorne," the judge ordered. Silence filled the room. Finally, Octavia whispered, "They weren't real." A gasp went through the courtroom. Caspian's face turned pale as the lies he had believed for years fell apart. "You forged him," his lawyer said. Octavia nodded, tears running down her face. "I wanted to protect the family name." In one simple sentence, she destroyed Caspian's entire defense. Alara's hands trembled slightly, but she stayed composed. She lowered her gaze, thinking about all the times she wondered if she could prove her innocence. Sullivan reached for her hand under the table, holding her steady. "You are safe," he whispered. Caspian glared at Octavia, full of rage and disbelief. "You ruined me," he hissed. Octavia shook her head. "You ruined yourself?" she said quietly. The judge struck the gavel once, bringing silence. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "we will not let pride hide cruelty." Caspian sat down, feeling his empire of ego crumble faster than any company he had ever run. When Alara was called to speak, the courtroom felt softer. She spoke with calm strength. She told how she left without anger, how she chose peace over revenge, and how Sullivan came into their lives not as a replacement, but as someone who made everything better. Every word showed Iris. "I didn't hide them," Alara said. "I raised them." Caspian couldn't look at her. Sullivan's face shone with pride. The judge nodded. "Mrs. Vesper, you have shown more dignity than we usually see. That matters." Caspian went next. He tried to explain his actions, talking about confusion and trust, but his words sounded hollow. "I was deceived," he said. The judge leaned forward. "By your sister?" "Yes," he said. "But you chose to be blind," the judge replied. The courtroom murmured. Caspian's calm broke. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said. "You were protecting your pride," the judge corrected. For the first time, Caspian, the man who had once ruled boardrooms, looked small. Outside, reporters shouted questions that no one answered. Inside, Alara sat quietly as the final statements ended. Sullivan whispered, "No matter what, they know who their real father is." Alara smiled faintly, holding back tears. The judge finally spoke. "Custody will remain with the mother, Alara Vesper," she said firmly. "I also commend Mr. Sullivan Croft for his devotion." Applause filled the room. Caspian bowed his head, trembling. Victory was not loud or proud, it felt like peace returning home. After court, Caspian stood alone. He looked at his reflection in the glass. He thought about every choice, every signature, every silence, and realized that power had never brought happiness. Octavia approached him. mascara smudged. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He didn't answer. Outside, he saw Alara hugging Sullivan and the twins, sunlight shining on them. The sight hurt him deeper than any court decision. For the first time, he cried. Not for her, but for the man he could have been if he had chosen love. Sullivan drove Alara and the twins home. Saren slept in her car seat, holding Kaylin's hand. Alara looked out the window, her heart heavy but free. "It's over," Sullivan said softly. "No," Alara replied, smiling faintly. "It's just beginning." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "You were amazing," he said. She laughed quietly. "No, Sullivan, you were." Their eyes met, and the silence spoke what words could not. Outside, the Atlanta skyline glowed gold in the evening. For the first time since her divorce, Alara saw a future that was not scary. It looked beautiful. Months passed, then years. The garden was full of laughter and white rose petals. Alara walked barefoot on the grass, her simple ivory dress brushing the dew. The twins, now 6, stood proudly beside Sullivan. Kaylin held the rings, and Saren threw petals in front of her mother. Jude dabbed her eyes, whispering prayers of joy. Sullivan waited under the arch, smiling steadily, his love understood without words. When Alara reached him, he held her hands. "You saved my life," he said softly. "Now let me spend the rest of my life saving yours." She nodded, tears sparkling like tiny stars. 1 year later, dawn painted the nursery walls soft gold. Alara held their newborn daughter, Iris Croft, the tiniest heartbeat of their long story. Sullivan stood behind Alara, his arms wrapped around both her and their baby. His chin rested gently on her shoulder. The twins peeked through the door, whispering so they wouldn't wake the baby. "She's so small," Saren said softly. "She's perfect," Kaylin replied. Alara smiled, her heart so full it could burst. She looked at Sullivan and whispered, "We made it." Outside, sunlight poured through the windows like a warm blessing. Far away in another city, Caspian looked at their photo online and whispered to himself, "I lost everything." Life went on. Iris's first birthday arrived, full of laughter and decorated with lilac ribbons. The backyard shone with golden lights strung above. Children ran between tables, faces painted, balloons floated in the sky. Sullivan was at the grill cooking while Jude handed out slices of cake, teasing that Iris had a perfect smile. Alara watched from the porch, her dress moving softly in the evening breeze. Her eyes were full of thankfulness. The twins helped their little sister blow out the candle, chanting her name like a song. For a moment, the world felt so small, like it could all fit in one breath. Alara's life, once broken, now felt whole and perfect, like it had been planned by God. After the guests left, Sullivan stood barefoot on the grass, looking at the stars. Alara joined him, barefoot too, their shoulders brushing gently. "You still look at the sky like it's telling secrets," she teased. "It is," he said, smiling. "It keeps reminding me how lucky I am." She rested her head on his shoulder and sighed. "We went through fire, Sullivan," she whispered. He nodded. "But we came out shining." The night was quiet, filled only with the sounds of crickets. Behind them, the twins slept on the porch swing. Iris slept safely between them, dreaming, safe because her mother had worked so hard to protect her forever. Far away in New York, Caspian walked through his quiet, spotless penthouse. The city lights reflected off the glass, reminding him of what he had lost. His big empire was there, but his heart felt empty. He poured a drink and stared at a photo of Alara, Sullivan, and the children, the family that could have been his. His hand shook. "I had everything," he whispered, "and I traded it for nothing." The drink burned his throat like a confession. For the first time in years, he whispered Alara's name, not with anger, but with sadness and regret. He finally realized that regret doesn't just go away quietly. Back in Atlanta, Sunday mornings became very special for the family. They went to church together, and Iris's giggles echoed during the hymns. Sullivan and Alara held hands under the pew, showing love quietly, stronger than big words could. After church, they walked through the park while the twins ran ahead chasing doves. Alara stopped sometimes just to watch them, her heart full of happiness. She no longer thought blessings were about money or fancy things. She had learned that peace lived inside forgiveness. When Sullivan kissed her temple and whispered, "Thank you for saving me," she smiled. "You're wrong," she said softly. "We saved each other." He believed her completely. As the years went by, Sullivan's work in business grew, but now it was built on kindness instead of competition. Alara joined him, building community centers and children's shelters all over Georgia. Every building had a small sign that said, "Love Restores." The twins grew up confident and kind, learning more from example than from words. Iris followed them everywhere, laughing and fearless. Visitors often marveled at how happy the children were, not knowing it was happiness born from hard times. Sullivan once told a reporter, "My wife is the reason I understand Iris." Alara, watching from the side, just smiled. Her story no longer belonged to pain. It now belonged to doing good and helping others. On Iris's 5th birthday, Alara sat alone on the porch after everyone went to bed. Fireflies danced over the grass like tiny stars. She looked at the sky and whispered a quiet prayer. "Not for myself, but for the man I once loved. I hope he finds peace," she murmured. In New York, Caspian gave half of his wealth to charity. It was his way of saying sorry and trying to make things right. Even though they were far apart, their prayers met somewhere in the middle, soft and gentle like mercy. Alara closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. She realized forgiveness was its own kind of freedom. The twins soon turned 11. Their bond was stronger than ever. Saren loved painting sunsets. Kaylin liked building tree houses with Sullivan. Iris followed them everywhere, barefoot and fearless. Their laughter carried through the garden like music. Alara never wanted to end. Every afternoon, Sullivan joined them outside, sleeves rolled up, eyes bright. "Mommy, Daddy's cheating again," Iris would shout during board games, making everyone laugh. Sullivan would pretend to faint in surprise. Alara laughed until her cheeks hurt, the sound mixing with the wind. Her heart was full in a quiet way. This was real love. Simple, ordinary moments became precious forever. One autumn evening, Alara and Sullivan hosted a fundraiser for families rebuilding their lives after hard times. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers, but the real feeling in the room was deeper than luxury. It was hope. Alara shared her story on stage for the first time. "Sometimes life breaks you, so it can rebuild you stronger," she said. The audience listened quietly. Her story wasn't about sadness. It was about Iris and how strong she had become. Sullivan joined her, taking her hand as the crowd clapped loudly. That moment wasn't about them. It was about every person who had ever rebuilt their life after being hurt. Alara realized that love was never wasted. Love could always come back. Years later, Iris was growing into a kind young girl, and Alara's eyes still shone with gentle love. Iris played piano while the twins prepared for college. Their laughter still filled the house, like a song that time couldn't erase. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky, Sullivan held Alara's hands. "You still make this world softer," he said, "and you still make it safe," she replied. He pulled her close as music floated in the air. In the window reflection, she saw everything she had ever prayed for: peace, love, and home. She rested her head on his chest and whispered, "We made it, Sullivan." The story ended where it began, with a woman and her faith. Alara Vesper Croft had been broken, betrayed, and left alone, but she never stopped believing that love could heal. Her journey showed what true strength looked like, not loud, but steady, not mean, but kind. The woman who had been thrown out of a penthouse had built a palace of love and care. The man who chose her now cherished her like a queen. The twins thrived. Iris grew bright and full of laughter, and under the Georgia sky, Alara whispered a final truth in her heart. Love never fails. It just waits to be found again.